Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to the Monday, May 1st, 2017 edition of VR News. Lots to talk about. Let's jump right in. Start with Tekken 7. Developers for that game revealing what we can expect in terms of virtual reality support, and that, yes, it will exist. Now, there's a video that they released, and I gotta admit, I walked away a little disappointed. It's got nothing to do with the viewpoint. I mean, I've loved fighting games pretty much from the start. Arcade classics, Kung Fu Master, Yi Are Kung Fu, Karate Champ, Street Fighter 2 in the 90s, the 3D accelerated fighters, Soul Caliburs, and of course, Tekken series, among others. Got to see it evolve and enjoyed the game. I don't expect them to do away with the view. It's pretty integral to the game itself. But I do expect the spectator-style VR that they're providing is immersive, is good. And in the video, I got to be honest, it looks janky as all hell. It does not look that good. Now, this could be early days still. They did a poor job of explaining that. The game's going to release June 2nd, Xbox One, PS4. They've also stated that the VR version is going to come later. So it could be, E3 rolls around, right around that launch date, and we find out a little bit more, and they've got a better version of the VR to show us. They just weren't clear on that. So I'm hoping it's not something like a Tomb Raider VR Mansion experience. My hope is it's Batman Arkham VR or better. I'd be okay with that, at least for this first shot at them going with VR. Now, this next story, guys, very cool to play in the background. If you're doing other things, milling about, you don't have to pay full attention. But 28-minute video, John Riccitiello, former Electronic Arts CEO, currently Unity CEO, giving his keynote at the VRLA 2017. And in it, he talks about that hype behind VR, and that we should temper our expectations. We've heard that before, but I love the way he delivers it. So he's got a graph up. I'll put the same graph up. The other week we talked about the VR life cycle, and it was a graph that showed what was called the trough of disappointment, which comes just before kind of that widespread acceptance. He shows his own graph, like I said, and it's got a diagonal bottom left to top right, which is kind of the media/hype growth. And then his own, which is a gradual curve well below that doesn't start to curve up and bisect through that line until the early 2020s. And he talks about the whys, how the big devs, they're spending tens of millions of dollars on video games. They aren't going to build it without an install base of tens of millions of installed HMD solutions to, at the very least, break even. They want to turn a profit, but at the very least, break even, which they can't currently do. So we've seen amazing indie stuff. We've seen money thrown at others to create VR games, even if they're not making money. But again, I love the why and the how. And he talks about Madame Tussauds' Ghostbusters experience, which I also tried when I was in New York, how damn immersive that is. And he says that experience is the key to understanding what we need in the home, minus the backpack. And he touches on that. It works, he says, in that instant because the backpack is actually part of the gear that the Ghostbusters in the movie use. The haptic wand, it all felt completely immersive, he said, as soon as he put the HMD on. And I agree. In order for the home to get there, he talks about the cost. It's got to be well under $1,000 all in. Give you an idea, for those of you who maybe only have PlayStation VR, my video card alone, granted it's a powerful one, the 1080 Founders Edition, it's $1,000 just on its own. Never mind the PC, the Rift, the Vive, all of that stuff on top. Yeah, multiple thousands of dollars for me for either of those solutions. So I agree, has to be well under. So for those companies to spend the 50, 75, 100 million, have a large install base, be untethered, in addition to the cost, and for those games or experiences that require you to walk around, make it feel like walking around in real life. Not graphically, experience-wise. And that means not doing jump rope over your tether, right? Bumping into things. It's got to work seamlessly like walking around would in real life. Bang on. Bang on. When asked, or when describing specifically when, like I said, his curve shows the early 2020s, but the magic starts to happen 12 to 24 months from now. So I really like that from that point of view of kind of tempering our expectations, but not just as a statement, backing it up with why and how. So very, very cool. Check that video out. And like I said, just play it in the background. He also had another speech that he gave at another event. And at that event, he interviewed or sat and chatted with Brendan Iribe and didn't hold back on the questions. John asked him specifically why he stepped down as CEO. And I loved Brendan's answer. Not only did I take it, to be an honest assessment of why he stepped down. In other words, I believe him completely. I believe him completely because I can relate to it. And what he said was, if you don't wake up every morning and feel like running to work, there's something wrong. And you got to do something about it. Either change your lot at your current employer or go elsewhere. Those are your choices, realistically. Those are the only choices you have. He chose the former, talked to Mark and Michael Schroepfer, and they said, go away, think of what you would like to do. Because his issue was, he loves the engineering aspect, the creation. Being a programmer, that's how he started. Then when they got acquired, he went from a group of 60 and it became all about human resources and people management and 30,000 foot level planning as opposed to being in the trenches. That's why he said he stepped down. He's kind of scaled it back a little bit. Again, both things I've done in my real life. Not feeling like running to work every day. That sure as hell for the last few months. And the dialing it back. So yeah, very good. And just one last thing to throw in that. He talks about his belief, Iribe did, similar to what John was saying, that he says we are right now at the Apple II moment. Anybody who's been around that long or just a student of history knows what he means by that, in that those first personal computers, rough as hell, but powerful for the time. And look what they've evolved into. Look at the cell phone. He talks about the smartphones, how long that took. And Saved by the Bell episode where whoever the character was, I can't remember, pulls out the antenna and this massive monstrosity on their back. That was a cell phone circa 1991, right? Compared to what they are now. So again, two back-to-back, kind of similar themed. Next news story, new Unity tools that bring interactivity and real-time CGI to 360-degree videos. That is now in beta. Natalie Grant, who is one of the senior employees at Unity, she showcased the interactive 360-degree video. It featured a dinosaur walking around, and they captured it by a 360-degree camera placed under a gazebo. An animated dinosaur appears in the park outside. Looking up, you see birds, an environment that kind of feels real within a 360-degree filming. How it's achieved is pretty cool. There's two layers. The outer sphere, that's the original 360 video. And then the inner, think of it almost like a green screen. Like when we do a YouTube video with a green screen and you look superimposed upon the background, like you're part of that background. It can look cheesy as hell, but when done right, looks pretty cool. That's kind of the concept here. You throw in the animated 3D objects, the dinosaurs, the birds, all those things in that inner layer and the space between the two layers. Very cool. You can check that out. I'm not sure if that's available for download, but we can expect to see more of that with this in beta. I'm sure devs are going to tinker with that, and future 360-degree videos are going to feature that, which is awesome because one of the things I've long complained about is that pivot nature to the 360-degree. The warping, it just, even with stuff like Litro Solution with the volumetric, it still needs more. And I think this is yet another step in that direction. Now, next story, Microsoft showing Windows in VR, then gives an Acer VR headset to everybody who attended the Vision Summit, i.e. all the people in the Vision Summit audience. What I loved about this is during John's keynote, he jokes, he goes, I'm going to show you slides because I'm not Oprah. This isn't an Oprah moment where everybody gets an HMD. And then his company turns around and does exactly that. Very, very cool. So he took to the stage, or Brandon Bray rather did, from Unity, and showed all of that in VR and then announced everybody was getting a free unit. So hopefully some devs in there, because to the rest it's going to be pretty useless until content arrives. Next up, an Australian who is working on his PhD. His name is Malcolm Burt. He's from Queensland. And part of his thesis is literally creating the ultimate virtual reality theme park. He was contacted by a German company to create the equivalent of what we've seen with the roller coasters, right? Where you're on a roller coaster, put the Gear VR on, and you're in an outer space battle. Well, now you're in a water slide, obviously waterproof HMDs, but that water slide is maybe a lava tube on some asteroid or alien planet. So very, very cool. Expected to open to the public later this year. It's called, or the ride will be at the Galaxy Water Park in Bavaria. Next story, WebVR, using what they're calling a magic window and having that as kind of the gateway to ultimately pushing VR out to billions of people. And what this magic gateway is just simply allowing people with mobile phones to utilize WebVR. Obviously, if you have an HMD, you're getting the full WebVR immersive experience. But if you've got a smartphone, you're still going to be able to check out WebVR content, much like you can use smartphones for 360-degree content by simply, panning them around, right? You turn around, you pivot. Nowhere near as immersive as putting the HMD on, but it doesn't limit you. And their stats show that to be accurate. 70 to 80% of the people using WebVR are doing it through a smartphone and panning the view. Over time, the VR component, it's going to grow. The hope is 50-50 and then surpasses it. So good way to get it out there and not make it strictly for people with VR, because that is sure to kind of make it, stagnate its growth. It's not going to get used beyond that group, which still only numbers in the hundreds of thousands. And then this last story, I get a kick out of this guy. One of my favorite game series, Metal Gear Solid. Of course, I'm talking about Hideo Kokima. And an interview that he did at the Tribeca Film Festival, talking about VR. And he's done a lot of that over the last couple of years since he parted ways with his former company. And he talks about virtual reality and how it has gone beyond the frame. And I saw that title, what the hell does he mean, beyond the frame? But he's got a good point. And when you hear it, it's so obvious and yet a pretty powerful statement. He says, well, think about it. The first photographs, they showed via a frame a scene. First movies, same thing. Screen framing the experience, TVs, etc. Now you've got VR, and suddenly your frame isn't this 2D portal. It's all around you. And talk about an incremental leap. And it was a big leap going from picture to movie and TV. But bypassing that frame altogether and going into VR is like the biggest jump yet. So very cool way of looking at it. I love his ability to kind of not just think outside the box, but think of ways, almost kind of like a unique, simplified look that really sums it up in a powerful way. And I think that's what he did there. Now, I consider Hideo part of my dynamic duo of frustrated Hollywood wannabe directors. Mentioned this before, the other dynamic duo team member, Chris Roberts of Wing Commander fame, him and the cutscenes. And Hideo, same thing. In fact, if you've never played a Metal Gear Solid, like, to me, I got to be in the mood because there's a lot of cutscenes, especially in Metal Gear 4. 8 hours and 28 minutes of cutscenes, basically the length of 4 feature films. And I'm not joking. That's, you stitch them all together. I've got the YouTube link. You can check it out. The single longest, the epilogue, over an hour just in its own. So there is a hell of a lot of video going on. And a lot of talking about VR. So I get a chuckle out of that. But seriously, underneath it all, I hope, unlike George R. Martin, who also does a lot of talking and not quite as much writing, and fair enough, you know, he's older now and he's going to go at his pace and he's going to do it when it's fun, despite what the fans think is their due. He's doing it at his own pace. I hope Hideo accelerates it a bit and we're not just talking about VR 2 years from now. Hopefully there's something tangible that he can announce at some point in the near future. All right, guys, that's it for the news on this Monday. 4 more days of employment. As always, guys, cheers.